My children sat in my living room and told me they wanted to put me in a nursing home. But I knew they only wanted to sell my estate. They saw my gray hair and shaking hands and assumed I was too weak to stop them. I let them believe I was confused because I needed them to underestimate me while I prepared to fight back. The afternoon sun felt warm on my face through the glass walls of the solarium. From my chair, I could see the Pacific Ocean stretching out beyond the cliffs of Carlsbad. The water was a deep, steady blue. White foam crashed against the rocks below. This was the view my husband, Harold, and I picked 40 years ago. We built this house when the land was just dirt and scrub brush. Now it was an estate. It was my sanctuary. I picked up my cup of Earl Grey tea. The china was thin and delicate against my fingertips. My hands shook a little. They often did these days. It was just age, nothing more. My mind was as clear as the glass in front of me. I remembered the date, the president, and exactly how much money was in my bank accounts. The sound of a car engine broke the silence. I looked down the long driveway. A silver Porsche pulled up to the front steps. My son Richard. A moment later, a black SUV followed. My daughter Claire. They were early for Sunday dinner. They were never early. I set my tea down. I adjusted the wool cardigan over my shoulders and waited. I did not get up to greet them. My knees ached when the weather changed, and I saved my steps for when they mattered. The front door opened. I heard the click of heels on the marble entryway. Mother. Claire's voice echoed through the hall. It was high and sharp. In here, I called out. My voice sounded raspy. I cleared my throat. They walked into the solarium. Richard wore a suit, though it was Sunday. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the furniture before they landed on me. Claire wore a black dress that looked expensive. She carried a large leather purse. You're sitting in the dark, Richard said. He walked over and flipped a switch on the wall. The overhead lights buzzed on. They were too bright against the afternoon sun. I was watching the ocean, I said. I didn't need the lights. It's safer with them on, Claire said. She walked over and kissed my cheek. Her lips felt dry. She smelled of heavy perfume and something metallic like hairspray. We worry about you falling. I haven't fallen in 10 years, I said. Richard pulled up a chair and sat opposite me. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He looked tired. There were bags under his eyes. We need to talk about the house, Mom, Richard said. I stiffened. We had this conversation last month. And the month before. The house is fine, I said. The gardener came yesterday. The roof is new. It's not the roof, Claire said. She remained standing. She walked over to the small side table where I kept my mail. She began flipping through the envelopes. It's the size. It's too much for one person. This estate. It's a burden. It is my home, I said. It is not a burden. Claire stopped shuffling the mail. She held up a blue envelope. This is a bill for the pool maintenance. It's past due, Mom. You forgot to pay it. I frowned. I paid that last week. I wrote the check on Tuesday. There is no record of it, Claire said. She tossed the envelope back onto the table. It made a soft slap sound. You're forgetting things. Little things. But little things add up. I did not forget, I insisted. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt heavy. I gripped the arms of the chair. I put the check in the mail myself. Richard reached out and put his hand on my arm. His grip was firm. Mom, listen. We just want what is best for you. We looked at a place in Escondido. It's very exclusive. They have full-time staff. You wouldn't have to worry about bills or stairs. Escondido. I looked at him. That is an hour away. Away from the ocean. It's safe, Richard said. I looked at my children. I saw the way they looked at me. They did not look at me with love. They looked at me like I was a broken appliance that needed to be thrown out. I am not going anywhere, I said firmly. I am staying right here. Richard sighed. He looked at Claire. They shared a look. It was a quick glance, but I saw it. It was a look of impatience. Let's just have dinner, Claire said. Her voice changed. It became overly sweet, like she was talking to a toddler. I brought lasagna. I'll go heat it up. She picked up her heavy purse and walked toward the kitchen. Richard followed her. I'll help you, he said. I sat alone in the solarium. The bright lights hummed above me. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I knew I had paid that pool bill. I remembered tearing the stamp from the book. I remembered the taste of the glue on the envelope. I pushed myself up from the chair. I needed to know why they were really here. I walked softly across the rug. I did not use my cane. I moved slowly toward the kitchen. The door was cracked open just an inch. I heard the clinking of glass. They were opening a bottle of wine. My wine. "She's worse than I thought," Richard said. His voice was low, but the kitchen had tile floors. Sound carried. "She's not worse," Claire whispered. "She's stubborn. If she doesn't agree to the sale, we lose the buyer. The developer wants the land by the end of the quarter. We need that money, Richard." "I know," Richard snapped. "My investors are breathing down my neck. If I don't cover the margin call, I'm finished." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. The plaster felt cool and rough. They were not worried about my safety. They were broke. They needed my money. "We can't wait for her to agree," Claire said. "We have to force the issue. Dr. Evans is ready to sign the affidavit. He just needs a reason. One big incident." "We'll make sure he gets one," Richard said. I heard the sound of wine being poured into a glass. My heart hammered against my ribs. It beat so hard I thought they might hear it. They were planning to take everything. My home. My freedom. My life. I stepped back from the door. I moved silently back to my chair in the solarium. I sat down and pulled the wool blanket over my lap. I stared out at the ocean. The sun was setting now. The water turned from blue to gray. I looked at my hands. They were still shaking, but not from age. They were shaking from anger. They thought I was weak. They thought I was confused. They thought I was just an old woman waiting to die. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. I would not let them win. I would not let them take what Harold and I had built. Richard walked back into the room holding 2 glasses of wine. He smiled at me. It was a wide fake smile. "Dinner is almost ready, Mom," he said. "That sounds lovely, dear," I said. I forced myself to smile back. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But I knew then that the time for being a mother was over. I had to be a fighter. I waited until Monday morning. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I did not drive my Mercedes. Richard checked the odometer whenever he visited. He said he was checking for maintenance, but I knew he was checking my movements. I called a yellow taxi. It arrived at the bottom of the driveway 10 minutes later. I walked down the long path with my cane. The morning air was cool and damp. I wore my heavy coat and a scarf over my head. I did not want the neighbors to recognize me. "Where to?" the driver asked. He chewed on a toothpick. "The electronics store in Oceanside," I said. The store was large and smelled of plastic and ozone. Rows of televisions played bright cartoons on the back wall. I walked to the security section. A young man with a blue shirt walked over. He looked at my cane and my white hair. "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" he asked. He spoke loudly. "I need cameras," I said. "Small ones. Hidden ones." He raised his eyebrows. "For home security?" "For a nanny," I lied. "I suspect she is stealing my silverware." He nodded. He led me to a glass case. He pointed to a small black box no larger than a die. "This record's in high definition. It has a battery that lasts 12 hours. It saves the video to a memory card." "I will take 3, I said. I paid in cash. $400. I kept the receipt in my pocket folded small. Back at the estate, I locked the front door. I placed the 3 black boxes on the kitchen island. My hands felt steady today. I had a job to do. I took the first camera. I walked to the large decorative vase in the center of the kitchen island. It held silk hydrangeas. I pushed the flowers aside and nestled the black cube among the stems. I checked the angle. The lens pointed directly at the counter where Richard usually leaned. I took the second camera to the solarium. I placed it on the bookshelf, wedged between a leather-bound encyclopedia and a history of California. The dark spine of the book hid the camera body. Only the tiny lens was visible. I placed the third camera in the hallway, on top of the grandfather clock. It faced the front door. I spent the rest of the afternoon reading the manual. I practiced connecting the memory cards to my laptop. The laptop was old, but it worked. I learned how to save the files. I learned how to name them. On Wednesday, Richard came back. He brought takeout food in brown paper bags. It smelled of grease and onions. I didn't have time to cook, he said. He dumped the containers onto the granite island. Where are the plates? I stood up. I moved slowly. I made sure my feet shuffled on the floor. I don't recall, I said. I looked at the cupboard where the plates had been for 30 years. Richard sighed. It was a loud, sharp exhalation through his nose. They are right here, Mom. Right where they always are. He opened the cupboard and grabbed 2 plates. He slammed them onto the counter. The sound echoed in the large kitchen. I am sorry, I said. I looked down at my hands. I felt confused. You're confused a lot lately, he said. He scooped food onto the plates. Claire and I are worried. This house is too big. You can't even find the plates. I watched him. He was standing right in front of the vase. The camera was 2 feet from his face. Maybe you are right, I said softly. He stopped serving the food. He looked at me. His eyes narrowed. What did you say? Maybe I need help, I said. Maybe Escondido is better. Richard's shoulders relaxed. He smiled. That is a sensible thought, Mom. Finally, we can visit the facility next week. I can bring the papers. I will think about it, I said. We ate in silence. The food was salty and cold. When he finished, Richard stood up. He checked his watch. I have to take this call, he said. It's work. He stayed in the kitchen. I walked to the solarium, but I stopped just around the corner. I leaned my head back to listen. I heard him pacing. I heard the beep of his phone. Claire, he said. She's cracking. She couldn't find the plates. I think she's ready to sign. I held my breath. No, I didn't give her the pills yet, he said. I didn't need to. She's doing the work for us. But bring the paperwork to the hearing on Friday. We will get the emergency order. Then we change the locks. He laughed. It was a short, ugly sound. Yeah, the view is great. It will look good on the listing. I walked quietly to my chair in the solarium. I sat down and looked at the ocean. The sun touched the water, painting a line of orange light across the waves. Richard left 10 minutes later. He kissed my forehead. Get some rest, Mom. Don't use the stove. I won't, I said. As soon as his Porsche disappeared down the driveway, I went to the kitchen. I reached into the vase and pulled out the small black cube. I sat at the kitchen table and plugged the camera into my laptop. I clicked on the file. The video opened. The picture was sharp. The audio was clear. Then we changed the locks, Richard's voice said from the computer speakers. It will look good on the listing. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and salty. I wiped it away with my thumb. I did not cry because I was sad. I cried because I was right. I saved the file. I named it evidence_01. Then I put the camera back in the vase. I washed the dishes. I dried them and put them back in the cupboard. I knew exactly where they belonged. Thursday afternoon arrived with a thick marine layer. Gray fog clung to the coastline and obscured the view of the water. The house felt damp and cold. I turned up the thermostat, but the chill remained in my bones. Tomorrow was the hearing. Richard and Claire had filed an emergency petition for conservatorship. They claimed I was an immediate danger to myself. I set the stage carefully. I placed a half-eaten piece of toast on the floor near the entryway. I left a pot of water on the stove, cold but with the burner dial turned to high, but the flame unlit so it smelled faintly of gas. I opened the windows in the living room, letting the cold fog roll in. Then I sat in the solarium. I draped my heavy blanket over my legs and let my head drop forward, chin to chest. I practiced breathing deeply and slowly. I waited. At 4 o'clock, I heard the front door unlock. Richard had a key. I had not changed the locks yet. I wanted them to feel powerful. Mom! Richard called out. He sounded annoyed. Why is it freezing in here? Check the kitchen, Claire said. Her heels clicked rapidly on the tile. Jesus! Richard hissed. Do you smell that? Gas. She left the burner on again, Claire said. I heard the click of the dial turning off. See? I told you. She's going to blow the place up. They walked into the living room. I heard the windows sliding shut. Then they came to the solarium. I kept my eyes closed. I kept my breathing steady. "She's out cold," Richard said. He stood close to me. I could smell his cologne. It was musky and expensive. Probably forgot to eat. "Good," Claire said. "Let her sleep. I need a drink." They walked away. I waited 10 seconds. Then I opened my eyes just a slit. They were heading for the kitchen. I remained in the chair, motionless. The house was quiet, so their voices drifted clearly from the kitchen island. I knew exactly where they were standing. The vase with the silk hydrangeas was right between them. I heard the pop of a cork. The glug of wine pouring into glasses. "To tomorrow," Richard said. There was a clink of glass. "Are you sure about the judge?" Claire asked. She sounded nervous. "Judge Harrison is tough." "It doesn't matter," Richard said. His voice was loud and confident. "The facility in Escondido is cheap. We stash her there, drug her up if she makes a fuss. Once the power of attorney is signed, we list the house. The market is peaking. We're looking at 10 million easy." My hands gripped the fabric of my pants under the blanket. "What if the evaluation fails?" Claire asked. She seemed lucid on Sunday. "It won't," Richard sneered. I heard him slam his hand on the counter. "I paid off the evaluator. Dr. Evans will say whatever I tell him to. I wired him 20,000 yesterday. The old hag won't know what hit her. She's practically a vegetable anyway." "God, I hope so," Claire said. "I can't deal with this commute anymore. I want my share in cash." "You'll get it," Richard said. "Just keep looking sad in court. Wear the black dress." They finished their wine quickly. They did not check on me again. They left the house, locking the door behind them. As soon as the car engines faded, I threw off the blanket. I walked to the kitchen. The air still smelled of gas and wine. I pulled the camera from the vase. I connected it to my laptop. My fingers flew across the keys. I watched the video. The picture was perfect. The audio was crystal clear. I heard every word. Drug her up. 10 million. Paid off the evaluator. I saved the file to a USB drive. I made 2 copies. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had memorized from the phone book 3 days ago. "Law Office of James Henderson," a woman answered. "This is Evelyn Vance," I said. My voice was strong. "I need to speak to Mr. Henderson. Immediately." "I'm sorry, do you have an appointment?" "Tell him I have evidence of a felony," I said. "And tell him I am ready to hire him." Mr. Henderson met me an hour later at a small diner on the highway. He was a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses and a frayed tie. He looked like a man who was tired of losing. I handed him the laptop. He put on headphones and watched the video. He watched it twice. When he took the headphones off, his face was pale. He looked at me with wide eyes. "Mrs. Vance," he said, This is explosive. Can you stop them?" I asked. "Stop them?" Mr. Henderson closed the laptop. He smiled a small, tight smile. "Mrs. Vance, with this, we are going to bury them." He took the USB drive. "I will prepare the motions tonight. We will surprise them in court. Do not say a word to them. Act exactly as you have been acting." "I can do that," I said. I went back to my estate. The fog had lifted slightly. I stood in my bedroom and looked at the clothes hanging in my closet. I pushed aside the gray wool sweaters and the sensible slacks. In the back, covered in plastic, was a navy blue suit. It was tailored and sharp. I had worn it to board meetings when I ran the company. It was a suit for a woman who gave orders, not a woman who took them. I pulled the plastic off. I ran my hand down the lapel. I went to bed early, but I did not sleep well. I lay awake listening to the waves crash against the cliffs. I thought about Richard and Clara's children. I remembered teaching Richard to tie his shoes. I remembered braiding Claire's hair. I grieved for those children. They were gone. The people who would walk into court tomorrow were strangers. They were thieves. I rolled over and watched the digital clock change numbers. 3 a.m. 4 a.m. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, I sat up. I felt a heavy stone in my chest. But under the weight there was something else. Resolve. I swung my legs out of bed. Today was the day. The Superior Court of California looked like a fortress of beige stone. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, met me at the bottom of the steps. He wore the same gray suit, but his tie was straight today. He held the door open for me. I sat in a wheelchair. I did not need it, but Mr. Henderson said it was a necessary prop. I wore my navy suit, but I covered it completely with the gray wool blanket from my sofa. I slumped my shoulders. I let my head hang low. We went through the metal detectors. The guards did not look at my face. They only saw an old woman in a chair. Inside the courtroom the air was cold. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. We parked at the defendant's table. The wood surface was scratched and worn. I placed my hands on my lap, under the blanket. I clenched them into fists to stop them from shaking. The door opened and my children walked in. Richard wore a black suit. He walked slowly, his head down. He held a white tissue in his hand. Claire walked beside him. She wore a modest black dress and flat shoes. She looked like she was going to a funeral. They sat at the table across from me. They did not look at me. They looked at the judge's empty bench. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. Judge Harrison entered. He was a large man with gray hair and a stern face. He sat down and adjusted his black robe. He put on a pair of reading glasses and looked at the file in front of him. "Estate of Evelyn Vance," the judge read. "Petition for emergency conservatorship." He looked up. "Mr. Vance, you are the petitioner?" Richard stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." "Proceed," the judge said. Richard cleared his throat. He twisted the tissue in his fingers. "Your Honor, this is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. My mother. She is my hero. But she is not herself anymore." He paused. He wiped his eye with the tissue. It was a dry wipe. There were no tears. "She leaves the stove on," Richard continued. His voice trembled. "Just 2 days ago I found the house filled with gas. If I hadn't arrived, she would be dead. She didn't even smell it. She was asleep in the chair." I stared at the grain of the wood table. I remembered the cold burner. I remembered him turning the dial. "She wanders," Richard said. "She forgets who I am. Last week she thought I was the gardener. It isn't safe for her to be alone in that big house on the cliffs. The ocean is right there. One slip." He trailed off. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," the judge said. He looked at Claire. "Ms. Vance." Claire stood up. She sniffled. "It's the money, Your Honor. She hides bills. She writes checks to people who don't exist. She is vulnerable to scams. We just want to protect what is left of the estate for her care. We found a lovely facility in Escondido. They can keep her safe. I have the affidavit from Dr. Evans here," the judge said. He held up a piece of paper. "It states that Mrs. Vance shows severe signs of advanced dementia and is incapable of making legal or financial decisions." The judge looked at me. I felt the weight of his gaze. "Mrs. Vance," Judge Harrison said. His voice was gentle. "Do you have legal representation?" Mr. Henderson stood up. "I am representing Mrs. Vance, Your Honor." Richard turned his head. He looked at Mr. Henderson with confusion. He whispered something to his own lawyer. His lawyer shrugged. "Very well," the judge said. "Does your client wish to address the court?" Mr. Henderson looked down at me. He nodded once. This was the signal. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sterile. I thought about the 3 cameras hidden in my house. I thought about the lies I had just heard. I thought about the facility in Escondido with the smell of bleach. I stopped slumping. I sat up straight in the wheelchair. I pulled the gray wool blanket off my lap and let it fall to the floor. My navy suit was pressed and sharp. The gold buttons caught the overhead lights. I lifted my chin. I looked directly at Judge Harrison. My eyes were dry and clear. I turned my head and looked at Richard. He froze. The tissue fell from his hand to the floor. Claire's mouth opened slightly. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was loud. It filled the room. It did not shake. "I wish to address the court. And I wish to address the lies my children have just told you." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation system. I placed my hands on the table. They were steady. "My children claim I am incompetent," I said. "They claim I am a danger. But I am not the one who created a danger." I looked at Mr. Henderson. Connect the laptop, I said. Mr. Henderson plugged a black cable into the side of his laptop. The large screen mounted on the courtroom wall flickered blue, then black. Your Honor, Mr. Henderson said. We submit Exhibit A video recorded inside the Vance estate this past week. Richard started to stand up. Objection. We haven't seen this. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Judge Harrison said. His voice was flat. He did not look at Richard. He looked at the screen. Mr. Henderson pressed a key. The video began. It was the footage from the kitchen vase. The angle was low, showing Richard and Claire from the chest up. They were holding wine glasses. The timestamp in the corner read Monday, 4:15 p.m. The facility in Escondido is cheap. Richard's voice boomed through the courtroom speakers. It was loud and distorted slightly by the echo, but the words were unmistakable. We stash her there. Drug her up if she makes a fuss. A gasp came from the back of the room where a few strangers sat. On the screen, Claire laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound. What if the evaluation fails? It won't, Richard replied on the screen. I paid off the evaluator. Dr. Evans will say whatever I tell him to. In the courtroom, Richard's face turned the color of ash. He gripped the table. He looked at his lawyer, but his lawyer was moving his chair away, creating a physical gap between them. The video continued. Once the power of attorney is signed, we list the house. The market is peaking. We're looking at $10 million easy. Mr. Henderson paused the video. The image froze on Richard's smiling face. Judge Harrison stared at the screen for a long time. Then he turned his head slowly to look at the defense table. His expression was hard. The lines on his forehead deepened. Is there more? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Henderson said. Exhibit B. Bank records obtained via subpoena yesterday morning. He clicked a new file. A document appeared on the screen. It was a bank statement. A red circle highlighted a transfer of $20,000. The recipient was Dr. Arthur Evans. Exhibit C, Mr. Henderson continued. Video from Wednesday. The kitchen. The screen changed again. This time it showed Richard standing at the stove. The timestamp was 3:55 p.m. The video showed his hand reaching out. He turned the gas dial. He did not light the burner. He left it open. He walked away. The silence in the courtroom was heavy. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm. That's out of context, Richard stammered. His voice was high and thin. I was checking it. I was checking to see if it was broken. You just told this court you found it on, Judge Harrison said. His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. You said you arrived and saved her. I. Richard looked at Claire. Claire was staring at the table, shaking her head. Tears were running down her face, ruining her makeup. Mrs. Vance, Judge Harrison said to me. Did you place these cameras? Yes, Your Honor, I said. I bought them at the electronics store in Oceanside on Monday. I have the receipt. You seem remarkably competent for a woman with advanced dementia, the judge said. I am old, Your Honor, I said. I am not stupid. Judge Harrison nodded. He picked up his gavel. He turned to the bailiff standing by the door. Bailiff, locked the doors. The bailiff moved quickly. The heavy wooden doors clicked shut. Mr. Vance, Ms. Vance, the judge said. He looked at them with disgust. This court finds that the petition for conservatorship is not only meritless but fraudulent. It is dismissed with prejudice. He paused. He looked at the papers in front of him. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented in this courtroom, evidence of perjury, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted elder abuse, I am issuing an immediate bench warrant for your arrests. No, Claire shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair over. You can't. Mom, tell him. We're your family. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. I remembered the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. But then I looked at the screen. I saw the woman who laughed about drugging me. You ceased to be my family when you decided to sell my life for $10 million, I said. Two officers moved toward the table. They pulled Richard's hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. It was a metallic final sound. Richard didn't fight. He just looked at the floor. Claire sobbed as the officer cuffed her wrists. Please, Mom. Please. They led them away. They walked past me. Richard looked up for a second. Our eyes met. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked defeated. The side door opened. The officers guided them through. The door closed with a heavy thud. The courtroom was quiet again. Mrs. Vance, Judge Harrison said, I am sorry you had to go through this. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. Mr. Henderson began packing up his laptop. I sat in my wheelchair for a moment. I looked at the empty chairs where my children had sat. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not joy. It was relief. The weight was gone. I stood up from the wheelchair. I smoothed my skirt. Shall we go, Mr. Henderson? I asked. Yes, let's go, he said. I walked out of the courtroom on my own 2 feet. Mr. Henderson drove me home in his sedan. He did not play the radio. I looked out the window at the Pacific Coast Highway. The fog had burned off completely. The ocean sparkled under the midday sun. It looked bright and normal, as if the world had not just shifted on its axis. We pulled up the long driveway. A white van was parked near the front steps. The side of the van read, Coastal Locksmiths. I called them from the car, Mr. Henderson said. I didn't want you using the old keys even for an hour. I nodded. Thank you. I got out of the car. I left the wheelchair in his trunk. I used my cane, but I stood tall. The locksmith was a young man in a blue uniform. He was drilling into the front door. Brass shavings littered the welcome mat like gold dust. Almost done, ma'am, he said. He blew on the hole. High security deadbolts. No one gets in unless you let them in. He handed me a set of shiny new keys. They felt cold and heavy in my palm. Mr. Henderson walked me inside. The house was silent. The air still held a faint scent of the gas from yesterday, mixed with the smell of lemon polish. I will help you gather their things, Mr. Henderson said. We walked through the house. It felt like walking through a crime scene after the police tape was removed. In the hallway gallery I stopped. I looked at the oil paintings Harold and I had collected over 40 years. They were landscapes of the California coast. On the corner of the largest painting, a view of the cliffs at sunset, was a yellow sticky note. I stepped closer. In Claire's handwriting it read, Sotheby's reserve $50,000. I moved to the next painting. Another yellow note. Keep for the condo. I walked down the hall. Every valuable item, the antique clock, the jade sculpture, the silver mirror, had a yellow square on it. They had tagged my life like items at a yard sale. I reached out and peeled the note off the painting. The adhesive made a small tearing sound. I crumpled the yellow paper in my hand. I moved to the next one. Peel. Crumple. Peel. Crumple. Mr. Henderson watched me. He did not speak. He took a trash bag from the kitchen and held it open. I dropped the yellow balls of paper into the bag. We went to the guest rooms. Richard's room was messy. His clothes were on the floor. His laptop charger was plugged into the wall. I gathered the clothes and put them in a box. I did not fold them. In Claire's room, her makeup bag sat on the vanity. A tube of lipstick was uncapped, leaving a red smudge on the glass. I wiped it away with a tissue. We carried the boxes to the garage. We stacked them next to the wall. I can have a courier deliver these to where they are being held, Mr. Henderson said. No, I said. Send them to storage. They can pay for it when they get out. We went back to the kitchen. The 3 black cameras were still in their hiding spots. I pulled the first one from the silk hydrangeas in the vase. I pulled the second from the bookshelf. I took the third from the grandfather clock. I placed them on the granite island. They looked like harmless plastic toys. Do you want me to take those? Mr. Henderson asked. Keep them, I said. For the trial. Mr. Henderson nodded. He put the cameras in his briefcase. He looked at his watch. I should go, Mrs. Vance. I have to file the paperwork for the restraining orders. Will you be all right here alone? I looked around the kitchen. It was large and clean. The sun streamed across the floor. I have been alone for a long time, Mr. Henderson, I said. I just didn't realize it until today. He left. I followed him to the door. I watched him drive away. Then I closed the heavy front door. I inserted the new key into the deadbolt. I turned it. Click. The sound echoed through the foyer. It was a solid mechanical sound. I walked to the solarium. I sat in my chair. The house was completely quiet. There were no footsteps, no whispers, no car engines in the driveway. I looked at the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks over and over, just as they had for 1,000 years. I was safe. I was wealthy. I was victorious. I picked up my cup of cold tea from the morning. I looked at the empty chairs across the room. The silence was not peaceful. It was hollow. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. The room was bright. The heavy curtains were open, just as I had left them. I lay in bed for a moment and listened. I heard the distant cry of a seagull and the rhythmic whoosh of the ocean. I did not hear creaking floorboards or whispered arguments. I threw off the covers and stood up. My joints felt stiff, but I did not reach for my cane immediately. I walked to the window. The Pacific was a sheet of turquoise glass. I went to the kitchen. I made coffee in the French press. I poured the hot water over the grounds and watched the dark foam rise. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and earthy. It masked any lingering scent of gas. I carried my cup to the granite island. I ran my hand over the spot where the vase with the hydrangeas used to sit. The counter was smooth and cold. I had thrown the fake flowers in the trash bin outside. I liked fresh flowers. I would call the florist later. The phone rang at 10 o'clock. It was Mr. Henderson. "Good morning, Evelyn," he said. His voice was cheerful. "I have news from the arraignment." "Tell me," I said. I sat down at the kitchen table. "The judge denied bail," he said. "Given the evidence of flight risk and the severity of the fraud, they will remain in custody until the trial. The district attorney is adding charges of attempted grand theft." I looked at my hands. They were steady. "And the restraining order?" "Granted," he said. "Permanent. They cannot come within 500 yards of you or the estate. Even if they manage to post bail later, they can't come home." "It isn't their home," I said. "It never was." "There is one more thing," Mr. Henderson said. "The previous power of attorney documents. I need to know what you want to do with your estate plan. The current will still names them as beneficiaries." "Come over this afternoon," I said. "Bring a shredder." Mr. Henderson arrived at 2. He brought a portable shredder and a thick stack of new documents. We sat in the solarium. The sun was high and warm. I placed the old will on the table. It was a thick document bound in blue paper. It detailed the trust funds, the property division, the stocks. It gave half to Richard and half to Claire. I opened the binder. I took the pages out a few at a time. I fed them into the shredder. The machine whirred loudly. The paper turned into thin white strips. It looked like confetti. Were Richard's trust fund. Gone. Were Claire's inheritance. Gone. Were the deed transfer instructions. Gone. When the pile was finished, the machine stopped. The silence returned. "Now," I said, "we write the new one." "Who is the beneficiary?" Mr. Henderson asked. He held his pen ready. "The Carlsbad Land Conservancy," I said, "and the Creeping Fig Foundation for Elder Abuse Prevention." Mr. Henderson paused. He looked up at me. "That is a significant donation, Evelyn. The estate is worth over $10 million. "I know," I said. "I want the land preserved. I want the house to become a museum or a park. And I want to make sure no other woman is locked away by greedy children." He wrote it down. The scratching of his pen on the paper was a sharp, deliberate sound. "And my children?" I asked. "What do they get?" "Under California law, you can disinherit them completely," Mr. Henderson said. "We just need to state it clearly so they cannot contest it." "Write this," I said. I looked out at the ocean. I saw a pelican dive into the water. Came up with a fish. "I leave nothing to my son, Richard Vance, and my daughter, Claire Vance. They have already taken enough." Mr. Henderson wrote the words. He turned the paper around for me to sign. Picked up the pen. The ink flowed smoothly. Evelyn Vance. The signature was strong. It looped and curved with purpose. "It's done," Mr. Henderson said. He closed the folder. We shook hands. He left the house at 4. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the wine fridge. I took out a bottle of the vintage red that Richard had been drinking the day I recorded him. I pulled the cork. I poured a single glass. The wine was dark and red, almost black in the center. I carried the glass out to the back patio. The air was cooling down. The sun dipped toward the horizon, turning the sky purple and gold. I sat in the teak lounge chair. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted of blackberries and oak. Tasted like victory. I looked at the cliffs. They were mine. I looked at the garden. It was mine. My children were in a concrete cell. They were likely blaming each other. They were angry. They were broke. I was here. I took another sip. A cool breeze blew a strand of hair across my face. I tucked it back. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. I was alone, yes. But the house was not empty. It was full of my memories. It was full of my things. And now it was full of my peace. I watched the sun touch the water. It sank slowly, inch by inch, until it was gone. I sat in the twilight and finished my wine. Then I stood up and walked back inside. I locked the door behind me. I turned off the lights one by one until the house was dark and safe. I went upstairs to sleep, and for the first time in years I did not lock my bedroom door.